yourself. We can go from there. So second, second client hot seat, something that you'll maybe be more familiar with, Sam, because I know if this entire idea and inspiration came from you, and something that obviously you've been providing to some of your clients, right? So,
It was
yeah.
actually James, and
Well,
uh, James was joking that he stitched me up.
yeah. Yeah. Well, here you are. So it's I think it's gonna be a cool one just because your journey is quite a cool journey. No journey is linear and everyone has their own trials and tribulations and stuff like that. But I think especially like outcome specific, there's been really positive outcomes from your journey. But similarly, like the process along the way, that I'm sure there's, plenty of lessons and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, well, I mean, we'll crack on, but if you just want to kind of give a brief intro, because obviously people buy into people, and I think a nice starting place is just to explain where you currently are in the industry, like what your coaching is maybe centered around. Are you PT? Are you online? Do you do both? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I got into PT when I was like 24, and I'm now 37. So I've been in the industry a while, and yeah, I got into it obviously because I like a lot of coaches just like absolutely love training. Um, and I do think it's quite important to like practice what you preach with, in front of your clients. I work with like Gen Pop and do a mixture of online and in person. So yeah.
Nice, nice man. Okay, cool. So obviously you're northern based, like I used to be. Um,
Yes.
so it's quite funny when you reached out because like I'd never really coached that. I've never really coached that many online clients from Leeds or like around Leeds, which is really ironic given that I'm from Leeds. So when your application form came through and stuff, I was like, oh, cool, this guy's from Leeds and stuff. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously we've been coaching now over a year. So you started back in, I guess like September, October time. So you started, I remember we did our strategy call when I had just started traveling. I think I
Yeah.
was in Belgium at the time.
Yeah,
Uh,
because you just finished your prep, haven't you? Because
yeah,
I was obviously following you on and your journey on Instagram. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So what brought you into coaching? Because obviously you'd kind of come from a different well, not come from a different background. You'd done the hypertrophy and body composition stuff, and then you went
Yeah.
into endurance for how long?
I blame COVID. So it was during COVID, and then it kind of spiraled. So it was 4 years, but pretty intense. It was kind of like 10 to 12 hours like a week. And for the first couple of years, I kind of held on to a lot of the muscle mass that I'd kind of gained over the years, but then slowly it started to atrophy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And what kind of, just to give the guys like an idea of the kind of stuff. So obviously training wise, yeah, lots of volume, but what was the outcome-based stuff you were doing like event wise, or why were you doing the endurance stuff?
Well, it was kind of to step outside of my comfort zone because all of my kind of like training, like PT career, I've kind of avoided cardio, and I did feel quite unfit. This was I did used to do cardio. I was in the Royal Marine, so I was quite fit at one point, but I had a bike crash where like my lungs collapsed. It was quite a full on um, accident, and breathing is a little bit harder.
Mm.
I do tend to wheeze, so I kind of like ignored, just like shied away from the cardio and just did the strength work. Um, so I set myself a goal of getting into cardio, and it started with 20-minute bike rides. Then I set myself a target of doing the hardest race in the UK, which is the Fred Whitton, and that was 1 year after taking up cycling. So I did that, and then but that didn't really go to plan, and then so I then returned the following year and got the time that I wanted, and that's when my motivation started. Once I'd achieved that, and with cycling and any endurance sports, it just takes up so much time.
Mm.
And yeah, it was just kind of interfering with my work and energy levels. And yeah.
Nice. And then that's what brought you back into the body composition world.
Yeah, I wanted to get my teeth. I had been maintaining like a couple of days of strength training, but you do not feel strong when you're doing that level of endurance. You know, you just feel I noticed it whenever I go on holiday and not do as much cycling in the gym, my strength would suddenly skyrocket.
Yeah.
So I was keen just to get a bit more mass back. I was looking quite emaciated. I think you actually said that I looked emaciated.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, that sounds like me. That's a word I would to be fair. But the funny thing is, like, when we talk about this, obviously there's like levels to it, right? Because if a Gen Pop saw your starting photos, they would be like, you know, I could only dream that they were my finishing photos. But to you, who's someone that's obviously had a history of training for so long, you looked at those photos and you're like, yeah, that's skinny to me.
Yeah.
It's really funny to kind of think back because I remember when your consultation form was filled out and I had your starting photos, I remember speaking to Laura and I was like, oh, Laura, I'm so excited. I've got this new client and he's in great shape. And, that process, I could see that journey for you being a pretty strong journey because your starting point was so
Yeah.
solid, yet your standard
Yeah.
is still so high.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, for sure. Like obviously your starting position, you felt quite skinny. And really, I think in reality, a lot of it was a lot of glycogen depletion, like you said, maybe some muscle wastage on top. But that kind of leaves you in this area where you are primed to just fill out as soon as you
Mm.
recommit to the hypertrophy process, right? Because I remember, so you started maybe October time, early October, and by Christmas you were like 7, 8 kilos heavier, and you looked much, much fuller. Like
Yeah.
before and after was quite drastic within a few months, really.
Yeah, it was crazy. Every single week when I was checking in and doing that, when I look back at the progress pictures, like this, like my shape was literally changing. I think some of that was obviously muscle memory a little bit, and yeah, it was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool because obviously, as we know, like hypertrophy is a slow burner a lot of the time.
Mm.
Especially once you've reached that like pinnacle of glycogen fullness and past the newbie gains phase, any change takes quite a long time to see. So it was probably quite a nice thing for you, especially getting back into the hypertrophy realm, that you were able to see these like quick wins happening quite fast with your body.
Yeah. Yeah,
That was very
I thought it might come back a little bit quicker than before. It definitely did.
yeah. Yeah, it really did. It really. Even then, I think you were still kind of November, December time. You were still like, but I used to be bigger, but I used to be bigger. Which is, I think it's kind of a natural thing when you've got quite high standards. But
Yeah.
ultimately, you took to the process very, very well. I think like there is credence in the fact that there was no stalling for us. There was no for some people, there was a momentum build up over weeks and weeks
Mm.
and weeks. For us, it was like from week one, it was just application. Uh,
Yeah.
really, really cool. So
Mm.
that's obviously that kind of took us up to then kind of Christmas. But the thing that I wanted to kind of discuss before we talk about like how this year's journey has looked is just one more point on like the endurance side of things. What do you think are the similarities or character traits needed for both journeys? So both like endurance-based sport and hypertrophy. Do you see any similarities there?
I think there's definitely crossovers. I think the cycling taught me to kind of like tolerate pain really, really well.
Mm.
If I was doing like a hill climb that was like 10 minutes and you're like literally at VO2 almost, then 1.5 minute on the hack squat is nothing. You can get through that because you just know it's going to be kind of gone. But the strength training, I find I can like really hammer myself for an hour, and then I've still got energy the rest of the day. Whereas on the bike, that energy compensation afterwards, you really feel it, and your body just doesn't want to move quite at the same. Yeah.
Mm.
So I did
Yeah.
notice those were the two big ones really.
Yeah, I think they're great points, and that's kind of almost what I would expect. I think to some extent, even the fitness that you were dragging into the hypertrophy or the fitness level you were coming in at probably stood you in good stead as well for like
Yeah.
performance in those resistance sessions.
Yeah, I guess recovery, and there was obviously a lot of mitochondria built, wasn't? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, cool. So, and then obviously we started kind of 2024. Now we continued that gaining phase right up through, I think, to about May. Let me get the date right. Uh,
I think
um,
it's about 6, 7 months.
yes, it was. It was October right through to the end of March. Okay, so we kind of hit the end of March, and I mean, I chuckled in my head when you said it, but you proper breezed over the fact that, you had obviously gone through this uh injury, that still kind of affects you even now. It's just funny how how much you brushed over it. Now, obviously, that's not really the point of today's conversation, but that is probably a valid point when it comes to why we held back on the gaining phase a little bit, right? Because we hit about 90 kilos, we were pushing quite a lot of food, and we started to see that aside from some like injury stuff that we'll talk about in a second,
Yeah.
it was the fullness of that became a bit of a challenge, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Fullness. How do you mean the fullness? Oh,
So
just feeling full.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
think there was a bit of that, and to be honest, I do like to be on the slightly leaner side. So it kind of I kept on pushing, and then I guess there comes to a point where you do suddenly start to notice that you're starting to maybe put on a little bit more body fat, and yeah,
Yeah. Which is kind of only natural. And everyone
yeah,
has that happy threshold, I think it's really important to say, like, when people talk about like health being an ideal percentile, like it's very different for different people, right? Some people feel their best, feel their healthiest at 12 to 14%. Some people feel their best at like 18 to 20%. It's completely dependent
yeah.
on the person.
Yeah, I've definitely got like a newfound respect for like bodybuilders that really push the food. It's like I don't know how
Yeah.
you do it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was speaking to a client the other day about this, about like how it does become almost diminishing returns where you're force feeding yourself for literally like marginal gains, like very, very little change in scale weight. And it's at that point where people tend to start reassessing.
Mm.
Uh, Now, to be fair, for us to go from October to the end of March, constantly pushing food is still quite a long time without any breaks.
Yeah.
So it's only natural that we were hitting a point where it's like, yeah, we probably want to take a brief kind of step back on this. But we didn't diet from there. We actually went into a maintenance period, right?
Yes.
Hypertrophy was still a goal. We know that we can elicit hypertrophic response mostly from training stimulus. It's not, the food just needs to be high enough to support it, right? So we kind of put you into a maintenance phase where we agreed that we'd pull back on the surplus, but we'd keep you at a high calorie number. So we're around 3,500 basically for 6, 7 weeks. And then you went away. You went to
Yeah.
South Africa.
Yeah.
Um, but between kind of Christmas and that point, there were a few things that we discussed, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this because I do see it being like not a repeating issue with clients because it's not like it happens that frequently, but the the mindset management around injury can be really, really difficult, right? And
Mm.
injuries obviously come in various forms. For some people, it's just a repetitive strain that builds up. For others, it's a car crash. Um,
Mm.
but I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on injury and the mindset that goes into navigating a period of dealing with an injury, because obviously we had like an adductor strain we were dealing with, amongst other things. Like, what is your take on that kind of stuff?
Well, I've noticed this with myself and also clients that are quite injury prone, is that if you've dealt with quite a few injuries, you do become more resilient and you're just like, well, I'll just do what I can and work around it. And you've just got to go in with that mindset.
Yeah,
Mm.
I
And
think,
try and like just like learn lessons. So I think off the back of my adductor strain, I then rejigged my whole diary around so that I allowed, because I was trying to cram some sessions within literally in between like my one-to-one sessions. So I'd have like an hour and I'd have to fit a whole session in, but I'd probably got about 50 minutes.
yeah.
And I think that was, in all honesty, that's what caused the adductor strain on the leg press, only doing like minimal warm-up before.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so it was good off the back of that. I've now, um, scheduled in like larger chunks for training.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's I think important. You know, a lot of people will put it down to external factors as to why they got injured, right? Rather than taking some responsibility and going, okay, could I have done anything better? Did I cause that? Uh,
Yeah,
I know for me personally, both my injuries have come off the back of poor night's sleep, where I've just
yeah,
not auto-regulated my intensity. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. On that as well, actually, it reminds me of kind of a period of conversation we also had in your hypertrophy phase where obviously we had this constant discussion of should we be doing more, should we not be doing more, right? This idea of 5 days of training compared to 4 days of training and stuff.
yeah. Yeah,
What that?
I learned. Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, I've really taken from this is that when you start a new block, because I was like this with cardio as well, is that when your form's good and everything's feeling good, I just want to push more. And you were saying, yeah, that's your level of strength at the moment with the new program. You can handle it, but then as you get stronger, you're gonna tip over what you can tolerate. I
Hmm.
definitely found that with the 5 days, and my body just wasn't recovering.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. And it's this difficult kind of foresight to have, right? Because whilst you feel good, you
mm.
feel like you can handle more. So only naturally when someone's got high standards, the question goes, well, should I be doing more? If I feel like I can be doing more, should I be doing more? As opposed to thinking, if I put more in, but this stuff is still progressing, then
Yeah,
well, how does that challenge my recovery rather than thinking, is there more that I can do just doing more in what I've already got? Essentially, can I take myself close to failure on what I've already got? And
yeah.
if the logbook is progressing, which is the goal, then I need to remember that not feeling beat up all the time is okay. And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think we normalize this feeling of overreaching to the point where, like, if we're not sore, if we're not fatigued, then we kind of second guess, am I doing something wrong? Do I need to be doing more?
Yeah, I think you joked with me. You're like, well, just get. You need to get another hobby. Get you out the gym. Get you out the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. Buy a house.
Yeah, yeah, and that'll keep you busy.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Okay, cool. So that's good. I wanted to kind of discuss that because obviously you have dealt with some injuries, but I think you've dealt with them particularly well. You know, like I said, I've had clients in the past that have really struggled with the mindset mentality that comes with injury. There's like almost if you injure your adductor and suddenly it kind of takes you a step back on your leg press and your hack squat progressions, that person then hyper fixates on the fact that they can't progress on their leg move rather than thinking, all right, let's just pivot to focusing on my upper body stuff, taking what I can. And then as soon as the leg's good again, learning from my mistakes, but starting to push again.
Yeah. I think another two things I took from that was, and you helped with this. You're like, right, go absolutely ham on the exercise that you can do that don't cause you any pain, and then for the leg exercises, I managed to um, still train with a more intensity than I thought by just changing my stance to a narrow stance. I took out the adductor a little bit more and also put a band around my knee. And then I didn't really progress, but I didn't lose any strength. I still hit the same weights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's nice. Okay, cool. And then that kind of takes us into prep. And this is what I mean about your journey being quite an interesting one. So by now, obviously, you absolutely killed it in the endurance game and then came into the body composition realm. You recomped really well in winter when you started. So you kind of regained that tissue that you were looking for fairly quickly. Then we kind of had like a small injury phase kind of over the new year. And then we decided, okay, let's hold off going to a maintenance phase because we want to stay just a little bit leaner. We don't want to get fat. Then you went to South Africa. And then we came back, and you had obviously at that point remembered, or perhaps already had it scheduled in, that every year you do 3 peaks.
Yeah.
So at that point, we were like, okay, maybe being leaner for that 3 peaks is wiser, being a little bit fitter, getting back in touch with our cardio. It maybe aligns nicely into a mini cut phase. Yeah, like people tend to go through mini cuts irregularly in a hypertrophy phase to just pull off a little bit of body fat. So that's kind of what we did to kind of align that with the three peaks. And then the three peaks happened. Things moved pretty well, I think, as far as I would say with the three peaks. But then afterwards, you kind of decided to seize the opportunity, right? This was at a time where we kind of had that discussion of, okay, should we just, whilst we're getting lean, I'm going on holiday in the summer, should we just continue getting leaner rather than
Yeah.
have this mini cut and me go away at, 90 kilos, but feeling quite heavy?
Mm.
Um, were they at that moment in time? Because obviously we're not quite at prep yet, but at that moment in time where you decided to continue dieting into the holiday, was that your main motivator, just the holiday?
The holiday, and I think, that how good you feel when you first go into a fat loss phase.
Hmm.
Um, and I was worried that my energy was gonna drop, but you were like, no, quite the opposite. You'll actually feel like you've got more energy, and I really did. And then obviously my other injury was the suspected hernia, but turns out it's not a hernia. It's just a bit of a like it's from my previous motorbike accident.
Yeah.
That felt a lot better as well,
Yeah.
because I was consuming less food, so that stomach discomfort was not there the same as well. So yeah.
Cool. And I really like this as a topic because something that I personally struggle with and something that I think you did pretty well is this concept of like seizing the opportunity or being spontaneous with the goals. Like obviously most of the goals we set should be somewhat kind of pre-committed or have the foresight to be like in 6 months time life's going to be like this, so I'd quite like to have this goal by then.
Mm.
But you actually did a really cool thing where post three peaks you were like, I feel great.
Mm.
Let's keep pursuing this a little bit longer. And then kind of aligned that with the holiday in summer. And I think that's a really cool thing to do. And I think that not a lot of people do that because of this idea of like sunk cost fallacy, where they might think, well, I've just spent the last 7, 8 months trying to build tissue. I don't want to lose that. So I don't want to diet. Rather than,
Yeah.
again, probably not going to lose it. But right now, I feel great from dieting. And ultimately, your goal above everything else in this journey is to feel great, right? That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
number one process. So I thought that was a really, really cool thing, man. So I just wanted to kind of ask you, like, has that always been something you've been quite good at in terms of seizing an opportunity, or is this something that you kind of picked up along the way?
I think I think I've always been someone that if I can't do something once my it might be my ADHD, but once my I'm not into something, and I then like pivot and just go with what I feel,
Mm.
kind of like a line don't grind.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I guess my other motivation was also we were coming into summer, and I felt like I'd been in a gaining phase for so long, and I'd lost touch of like fat loss, which all my clients are fat loss. So I really felt like I was a bit out of touch because some of them are like I'm linked up with them on NutriCheck, and they can see that I was having 1,000 calorie meals, 2,000 calories before lunch, and they were like, oh, so it's all right for you. You've got so many calories to play around with. So yeah, I wanted to also get back in touch with that as well.
Nice. I like
Yeah.
that. I think that's a great point. I know something we kind of touched on a little bit on yesterday's group call is that idea of, when you go into a prep or a dieting phase, it reconnects you with what most clients' journey is for our Gen Pop clients. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And for numbers for people as well. So you started with me at around 80 kilos, right? So like we said, 80 kilos, running pretty flat, very, very lean, but maybe feeling a bit stringy. By the time we hit Christmas, you were about 85, 86, depending on how full you were. So by that point, obviously, it was basically like 5, 6 kilos, but still very good composition. So, a lot of glycogen, some muscle tissue gained. And then between Christmas and before dieting, we basically got up to 90 and then maintained it. And then when we started dieting, you went from 90 back down to eventually come shoot day 80 again. So you'd literally did full circle in terms of body weight from starting place, building up, and then coming back down. But
Yeah.
obviously, like we discussed on your prep, that 80 kilos shoot compared to 80 kilos 11 months before would looked very different. Like the body composition looks very, very different. And
Yeah, you said you will by shoot day will have you peeled and 80 kilos. And I was like, oh, but that means I'm gonna
be the
look
same.
like I was when I was cycling, surely, but I look completely different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's mental, like really full. And even with dealing with obviously some of the injuries and stuff, because you've gone from cycling so much to training everything in a hypertrophy way with just that additional bolus of cardiovascular work. Like your legs obviously came in much thicker, your upper body was definitely much, much thicker, and you were the same body weight, which means undoubtedly you were leaner than when you started. So yeah, it was a really, really cool journey, I think, kind of full circle wise. Calories, I'm just looking at the calories as well. So calories are a pretty funny one, and obviously something that if you do share that journey with your clients, they'll have seen you go through like a full circle with. Because at the top end of your gaining phase, we got you up to about 3,700 calories. So just shy of 4,000 really. And then by the end of prep, you were down at 2,000. So you'd gone basically up to nearly 4,000 calories, where you're saying clients are looking at yours going, well, you've got it easy, you're eating so many calories, to then nearly halving the amount of calories you're consuming by the end of prep.
Yeah.
Um, Mental. That's quality, man. So good. So let's get on to prep then, obviously. So this diet started, and I think this is a really important point because not a lot of people realize this, but you can decide to do a photo shoot at any point, right? You don't have to decide to do a photo shoot before you start dieting. Yeah, and this is why it's quite useful year round to be quite in control of most things. I know you have a semblance of flexibility. We've talked about it before, where you are quite a social person, but 95% of the time, your food is so well managed that even if we're in the top end of a gaining phase, we could just flip scripts and go, okay, cool, let's stick you in a 12-week prep. And I think that's a really cool place to be. A lot of people struggle with that because when they get into a hypertrophy phase or a gaining phase, they get quite complacent. It's a lot easier to be dialed in a dieting phase. But anyway, we started this dieting phase, and it probably wasn't until 6, 8 weeks into the diet that you turned around and was like, should we just do a shoot as well? Like, and again, getting those kinds of messages is really, really cool because that's you holding yourself to a higher standard. It's you seizing opportunity. But what kind of brought that to your mind? Because obviously it wasn't the original intention.
Well, in hindsight, I might have underestimated how much work it was gonna take. But I kind of do like a big. I tend to do like a big yearly challenge, right? I just decided, right, this is gonna be the year's challenge. Um, Obviously in August as mainly a one-to-one PT, a lot of my clients are away on holiday, which freed up a bit of time, so I could dedicate a little bit more time to that.
Mm.
Um, but my holiday to Denia with my wife was just not motivating me. So I felt like I needed like a bit more of a sense of urgency.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Urgency is cool. And it's interesting to hear that like you didn't you didn't book a shoot because you wanted to do a shoot. Like, of course, you kind of wanted to do a shoot, but you booked a shoot as a vehicle to drive motivation for your fat loss phase.
Yeah, and I think I think in all honesty, I did at the start of the diet, I did in the back of my mind have the idea that I would like to do a shoot. You know, seeing all of the guys on the program and seeing their results is really obviously really inspiring. Um, but I didn't want to put too much pressure on myself.
Mm.
So I thought, right, let me just like tick along, tick along, tick along, and then if I feel like I can do it, then I'll pull the pin.
Yeah. And similarly, when you do need that pressure, that's when it's time to book it, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I guess it works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Which, yeah, I really, really like. It's something that I've done more recently. So, like, the first prep that I did, the shoot was booked way in advance. The second prep I did, I probably booked it about 4 weeks into dieting. And the third prep I did, I didn't book probably until I was about 8 weeks out. And actually, you're right. Like when you can use the booking of the shoot as a way of redialing you in when things get slightly tough, you get this new added focus. Like you said, it's not easy. There is still challenge, but you're kind of more up for the challenge because you've got this additional accountability of a shoot now. Um,
Yeah, because I think for that last little bit of leanness, it requires like 80% more effort, doesn't it? It's so much harder, and you need that little bit extra.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. And it's cool, man. It's a very cool journey. So I mean, like I said, 90 at the start of prep, down to 80, and the overall dieting length was 14 weeks. But with that, obviously there's some refeeds. You obviously had the 3 peaks, so we refed you for that. It's like a 14-week diet all in all, but it was probably turned into a prep, I think, in the last 6, 7 weeks. So maybe nearly halfway through or so. So yeah, very, very cool. What were you, I guess we've already talked about the expectations actually. So what do you feel like the lessons learned from the prep were?
Well, I one of my main goals as well was I wanted to get better at dealing with hunger.
Mm.
So coming from endurance, I was able to just basically eat what I wanted. I was on, including like peri nutrition with the cycling. It was kind of over 4,000, and I was like, not putting on any weight. So I got used to eating that amount. And I do consider myself as being like quite a hungry person. So I think with your guidance, I wanted to navigate that better.
Mm.
Um, and I think you highlighted that there were quite a few items on my diet that were still processed. So I
Mm.
definitely went down the more like single ingredient, high satiety diet, which really helped.
Nice. Yeah,
Mm.
totally. I think there's a necessity for it eventually, right? And I think as well, like those conversations kind of need to happen at the right time. Like they didn't really need to happen at the start of the diet because there was nothing particularly detrimental to doing it. But when the feedback comes in from you that you're feeling hungry or you're struggling a little bit or whatever else, then obviously we can kind of nudge things in the right direction and be like, look, have you considered doing this instead? Because you're probably going to feel this way or have this slightly different outcome. And you're in a position where you're ready to hear it because you're feeling quite hungry or otherwise. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely.
Yeah. And then I've always I've always tracked. I've always been quite flexible, and um, I've always been quite actually against meal plans. And then you suggested there was a few weeks where it slowed up a little bit. I mean, I did move workplace and move gyms, um, and you suggested kind of going to like a rotating meal plan like week by week and just
Yeah.
literally nail the same meals. And that was a game changer. That literally just took out the decision fatigue, and like my rate of loss really sped up then.
Mm. Okay, so just on that, because obviously, naturally, people hear like maybe meal plan or repeating meals and think, oh, it's rigid and thus it's not a good diet or anything like that. What would you say to that?
Quite like just the opposite, because obviously it's not a meal plan with foods that somebody else eats. We obviously sat down, went through my food diary, and then kind of planned meals off that. So yeah,
Yeah, so it's foods that
not yeah,
you're
it's
actually,
foods that you enjoy, and yeah, it's just getting the quantities right, so you just don't have to think about
yes, like
it.
that. In terms of prep, so the different people have different, I guess, not attitudes, but I guess like phenotype, no, archetypes towards prep, where some people really struggle with the nutrition side of things, and some people really struggle with the training side of things because of the lack of energy. Which did you find more challenging? Was it the diet or was it the training?
Uh, I think with the diet, I think historically it's been diet, but I think with your help, the diet was a lot better. I didn't get I didn't notice I got particularly um, hungry, but I did notice that my energy was low. But there was a few days I tried fasting
Mm.
and then training before, but my performance was real. I did notice that it did dip. Um, so I think like not one or the other really. I held my strength, which was good. Really focused on obviously peri nutrition and getting plenty of carbs around the session.
Yeah.
So
Good. The training side of things is a difficult one because obviously, especially as a coach, where you understand the purpose of fueling, sometimes that knowledge is also the curse, right? Because you're going into these sessions knowing you're underfueled,
mm,
which, there is obviously that element of what you believe becomes kind of reality in your training output. So there is always that slight difficulty I find with certain coaches with the training output side of things.
yeah,
Um,
I think what motivated me was because obviously I'm thinking I'm going to be losing muscle. I'm going to be losing muscle. So I need to train extra hard so I still keep resemble some kind of physique at the end.
yeah. Yeah, this is true. And actually, that kind of reminds me. So, because your standards were very, very high, like to the point where like some of the check-ins that we were seeing, you kind of went through that. And I mean, Jimmy's on the call now. Like Jimmy went through the same thing. Like most people in prep do that. I'm not going to be ready in time kind of thing. And you definitely had that as well. So we kind of pulled the pin pretty hard towards the end. And I think that's one thing that taken away from the experience for you, especially if you give that to your clients, is just knowing that the reason it got so difficult at the end was just because of your high standards.
Mm.
If you were 3 weeks out saying, do you know what, Jack, I feel ready now, then we could have pulled the gas back a little bit, depending on obviously what I thought as well. But as soon as you're happy and content with the shape that you're shooting in, anything additional can really open up a negative connotation with photo shoots, right? So
Yeah,
I would say like that process doesn't have to be so difficult towards the end, depending on someone's like standard, but just because your standards were so high, that's why you kind of stepped up to the challenge, and that's why the challenge was so kind of great towards the end. Um,
yeah. I think I did want to go into the shoot like my leanest to date. I appreciate you. Obviously, guys do shoots where they're not quite as lean all year round, don't they?
yeah, of course. Exactly. Exactly. But I credit you, man. Like I think it's important to have those high standards. As a coach leading from the front, you always want to kind of be bringing your 1% extra, whatever that is. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and also thinking like this level of like hardness for me is kind of what my Gen Pop clients are experiencing, just actually adhering to like general daily habits.
yeah, for sure. Just on the coaching business side of things, what noticeable changes did you see with your client interactions as you were going through prep and like sharing your journey? Did you find that there was quite a positive correlation between like your coaching relationships and prep? Because obviously people think like when I'm prepping, I'm going to be low on energy and miserable. So my client relationships are going to dwindle because of that.
Yeah, no, I think you have to be quite a good actor at times. Um, but I mean, my clients that I've had quite a few years, I did kind of just test the water and see if they did notice a dip in like standards or my energy levels, and the majority of them said they didn't notice. Just obviously that I looked hungry.
Yeah, that's
Um, but yeah, definitely I noticed that instead of doing like going 360 round my client, I'd stand on the spot a little bit more.
yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely
Feet
noticed that. Yeah,
entered to the ground. Yeah. I
yeah.
resonate with that one. Do you see yourself taking clients through that journey, through their own photo shoots?
So off the back of mine, I have had two or three clients that definitely want to do it. So they're in the process now. Yeah, so it's quite cool.
That's very cool, man.
Yeah,
That's
but definitely it for a good chunk of time, it does make you like actually more productive, doesn't it?
yeah,
It can do, I
definitely.
guess. Yeah,
Definitely. You've got so much zone two cardio to do that, you end up habit stacking that with some work to catch up on, or videos or podcasts, or so your learning tends to improve a little bit.
Yeah, and yeah, I just feel you generally feel like a lot more on it, whether it's because you're running a little bit more sympathetic or yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I would definitely agree with that. Um, and I think, you know, in not hindsight, but in terms of that, like that's where we want to get a lot of our clients, right? Like the Gen Pop clients that don't want to do shoots really should probably be existing in that state of like the golden zone of being lean enough and productive enough for their quality of life to be as high as possible. Yeah, like, and unless they're going, no, Sam, I want to be absolutely shredded, in which case, obviously, we can take them there. Like, that's our goal for most clients. And it's good for us to feel that, even though we tend to, as coaches, push ourselves to the extremes, you know, whether it be hypertrophy, whether it be endurance, whether it be fat loss, we push ourselves to the extremes, but our clients don't tend to want those extremes because of the consequences in other areas of life.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I guess you get everyone like squeeze that cloth, don't they? And they realize, yeah, I'm done. I don't want to go any further. They think they do, but yeah, they don't.
1,000%. What is your, speaking of, because that again, I'm just kind of reminding myself of questions to ask now. Speaking of kind of the sacrifices going to those upper limits of your potential, obviously you have a missus.
Yeah.
What is your advice to someone navigating a photo shoot prep with their partner and like managing that environment, both from a relationship standpoint, from a household standpoint? What's your advice?
Yeah, it's tough because my wife is not into fitness at all. So she's a solicitor and she just I mean, in her words, she was like, you know, the problems that I have to deal with on a daily basis, yours seem pretty insignificant. But it's just it goes back to communication, doesn't it? And you've got to communicate that this is important to me. It's only for a short period of time. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, communication's key, right? For sure. Did
yeah,
you, obviously you finished prep, went to Denia pretty quick after. Like, was there a hangover period after prep where you spent that kind of making it up to her, as it were?
uh, yeah. Maybe not. I think actually, I thought going to Denya would be a really good idea, like the week after prep. But I probably could have done with like another couple of weeks of just coming down off prep.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was so happy when we actually started eating together more, and
Yeah.
um, we don't eat together during the week anyway because of our lifestyles. But definitely at the weekend, we're very sociable with friends, and so yeah, there was a lot more of that, which is good.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. And obviously now you get to enjoy a lot more of that now. Do you find that post prep, because obviously that was that period of sacrifice on your socials a little bit, do you find those moments, or did you in maybe the following couple of months, did you appreciate those moments more, given that you'd obviously spent some time sacrificing them?
Yeah, but also when I was on prep, I was still very sociable, but I wouldn't necessarily, um, eat exactly what I wanted. I had to obviously make sacrifices, but it made me appreciate actually just enjoying like the company and just focusing more on that rather than the actual food or drink.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I've actually still like taken that into these social occasions as well. Yeah.
Yes. I like that as well. I like
Mm.
that. Awesome. So what is the next step for Sam's goals? Where are you headed next?
Um, well, well, obviously, I'm in a muscle building phase now, but also at the same time, like in getting into running a little bit. So a little bit doing that on the side. I do like to feel fit and strong, so keep on going good. Like I say, I don't struggle with motivation for training. I absolutely love it. So yeah, we'll see what the new challenge is.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure stuff will crop up.
Yeah.
And kind of like you said about endurance as well, like as soon as you stop enjoying it, pivot to something that take takes your interest and that you think you'll enjoy more. And that's kind of, I think that's a really valuable thing that we can all do. I kind of always said that about coaching, but I guess it's kind of relevant to all areas of life. Like, there was a period of time where when I was learning beyond body composition when I was learning like the advanced stuff, the biomechanics, or a bit more about nutritional sciences and stuff like that. I would stray my own goals towards those things because I thought I should, because I was always told I should be applying. So I was doing those things on myself. So stopped training as much hypertrophy. I'd train these weird functional patterns instead and stuff. And I just stopped enjoying my training. And it wasn't until I went back to what I actually enjoyed that, I started making really good progress. So I think that's a really good kind of lesson to take away anyway.
Yeah, and I would say that I'm like 100% enjoying my training more at the moment with extra fuel and focusing on performance and improvement. And yeah, it is you do get like a new. It's almost like a little bit when you return back to training after being ill in a way, and you get your energy and your batteries full. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so I've definitely got that new like lease of motivation.
It's
Mm.
like that. Cool. Have we got any last thoughts to share about your journey before we close off this call? Any advices, recommendations that you'd want to give to anyone that either is on like a similar journey to you or is thinking about moving from endurance to hypertrophy or is thinking about doing a prep or anything really?
Well, I think you have to do at least one shoot. Eh?
Nice.
I think every coach should put themselves through it once, I reckon.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. Mostly because it is and can be a really positive challenge. And especially, to open the door to potential clients doing it in the future, but also, let's be honest, like an average 2, 3, 4 kilo fat loss phase isn't a challenge to us. So when it comes to like truly empathizing with what a client's going through, when they're actually really struggling to lose that weight, for us to really empathize, we have to put ourselves through something that's a struggle. And for us, the level of that has to be at something like a photo shoot or something more advanced because, yeah, the mini cut, for example, would not have allowed you to really experience what a client would experience because it's too
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah. And I
definitely.
think I guess just because even if you've had a bad experience with like another coach, I do think that the experience obviously with yourself would be a lot different this time.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, that's something that I value highly is just making sure it's a process that you want and that you enjoy and is right for you. I'm not in here to kind of bottleneck people into a certain way of doing things.
Mm.
And that's cool, man. Like there were some really interesting parts of your prep that like for me were new territory. It was a new photographer. I'd never used Andy before. I'd seen his work, but I'd never used him. So to have him do your shoot was again like a really nice experience because I've got now someone else to potentially refer to in leads that I never had before.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah, he was great. Your photos are a class. Like the not just like the color grading, but the like the shading because of the gym setup and stuff. Very cool.
Yeah, and to be honest, he really helped with like the posing, and he knew the gym inside out. So I mean, that was a lifesaver. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty useful. Nice man. Okay, wicked. Well, I appreciate your time. We can
No
close it
worries.
off there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording